Welcome to the Irish NFL Show's Week 9 preview and picks show brought to you by QuinBet. Good evening also to everyone who's joining us live on our X, YouTube and Twitch feeds, or if you're listening back to us after we've recorded, thank you very much on whichever podcast platform of choice you are listening, and please do remember to like or subscribe to the show. Our weekly picks preview show is available from Friday morning every week. Please do, as I say, give us a like or hit the subscribe button. It does help others find us and it help us spread the word about the Irish NFL Show. It's Brian O'Leary, Shane Brennan, Kieran Boyle and Noel Dowling here with me, Conor Brophy, this evening. No buys for the team this week. We're all present and correct in the Quinn box for our partner QuinBet. Now remember, the brief special window where we get our football an hour early on this side of the Atlantic is now over. So we're back to a 6 p.m. start for the early evening games and a 9 p.m. window for the Sunday games. And Sunday Night Football is back at the usual time too. There's only two teams on bye this week. That's the Steelers and the 49ers sitting this weekend out. For our previewing pleasure this evening, we have 8 games in the 6 p.m. window. We've 4 in the 9 o'clock window. And then we close out with our Sunday Night Football preview. Thursday Night Football already taken care of. That podcast is in the can. Brian and Kieran O'Donovan discussed tonight's matchup. Again, if you're watching live, it's tonight's matchup. Obviously, you've already missed it. If you're listening back to us, that's between the Houston Texans and the New York Jets. So you can pick that podcast up on whichever podcast platform you choose. Segment 1 of our picks is brought to you by our partner RuPoint. And we start with the Cowboys visiting the Falcons, where, Kieran, the Falcons are 3-point favourites at home, coming off their sweep of the Buccaneers, which they completed at the weekend. They mugged the Bucs the first time around, but they were pretty good value for the win second time out. They come up against the Cowboys team that's in a bit of a free fall.
They're in a free fall, and it's action time. November is going to have to be the time where Jerry starts getting things done, because you've got a 90,000 seat stadium in Arlington, Texas that's got to be filled, and people have got to come through that tour. So Jerry's going to need the money coming in, so he's going to need this team relevant for the next couple of months. Cowboys, still no run game for the Cowboys. I mean, they haven't had a run over 20 yards this year. We all know the struggles they've had running the ball, but they still have Zeke, they still have Dak. And they still have CeeDee Lamb. So I still like what Dallas can do. I still like their ability to score points. And saying that, Atlanta at home are a different kind of proposition. Yes, they've put Tampa to the hilt the last couple of games. And I've said a lot over the last couple of weeks. I really like this Atlanta team. I like the mix of the run and the throw. Again, the defense has kind of regressed a little bit over the last couple of weeks, but they've got a solid run game that's going to put that Dallas run defense under pressure. Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier is going to do a lot of work against that team. So it's going to be an interesting kind of mix between a team that doesn't really run the ball and a team that doesn't really throw the ball as much. So you're going to have Dallas throwing the ball, and they throw the ball, I think, 77% of the time. And, Atlanta runs the ball a lot with Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. I like a good amount of points in this game. I think it's going to be, over under 50 points, something in that range. I actually like Dallas in this. I think they're going to get the win. Again, they're on the road. They're a totally different team on the road. They're 3-4, and they've really got to get going this season, because now we're into November. We got the Thanksgiving games that are going to be coming up soon, and they've got to start, putting a bid in for that wild card position. Cousins has got propensity for a couple of shock games during the season. So I think this might be one of the ones for him, despite the fact that there's still no Micah Parsons. That was announced today, so he won't be in. But they've still got a decent defense that can put some pressure on the quarterback. So I like a little bit of offense in this game. I think a lot of people will be picking Atlanta to win, but I actually like Dallas in this one.
Noel, as Kieran was pointing out, the Cowboys have been much better on the road this season. Arlington hasn't been pleasant for them. Will they have a happier visit to Atlanta?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair point by Kieran, but I just don't see the Cowboys at the moment being able to go into Atlanta and get a win. Kieran mentioned that Atlanta offense, the run game. I think the Cowboys are really, really going to struggle with this weekend. I think they're going to find problems there. I mean, the Atlanta defense hasn't been great in terms of quarterback pressure and sacks. I think they're down near the bottom of the league when it comes to all of that. I think they're bottom with sacks. So, I mean, that's something that can give the Cowboys hope that maybe Dak will have time to find CeeDee Lamb. But for me, when I look at this Cowboys team, CeeDee Lamb is the only real player I see on offense or defense at the moment. Obviously, we know they have injuries on defense, Micah Parsons. So I don't know. I just think when this offense for the Atlanta Falcons clicks, it can put up points. We look at the Dallas defense; they've conceded a lot of points, especially the last couple of games. They've conceded a lot, and I just think this offense of Atlanta will have what it takes at home to put up points on a Cowboys team, which is really struggling. I mean, at the start of the season, I thought they would drop off a bit from where they had been the last few years. But I thought to maybe 10 wins, but now it's looking like they'll really be struggling to maybe even hit that. So things will have to change quickly. I just don't think it's this weekend in Atlanta.
Yeah, I would agree with that. As I'm throwing my pick into the ring, I think Cowboys are just too unbalanced. It's going to be tough for them in Atlanta. I think they've caught the Falcons at the wrong time, and I think it's going to be a home win. Brian?
With you, Connor, I think it's a Falcons win. Too many unknown questions about this Cowboys team right now.
Shane?
I'm extending Kirktober by another week. Give me ATL.
All right, good stuff. Next game up is Broncos at Ravens. Baltimore looking to bounce back, Brian, at home, and they are 9-point favourites.
The kind of game a couple of weeks ago you would have thought was a formality. I think the most interesting thing right now is what's the nature of Lamar Jackson's injuries? How serious is it? It's 2 days in a row now where he hasn't practiced. You know, when you hear it one day, you don't necessarily raise your eyebrows, but you think, okay, that's something of note. But when you go 2 days, to me, that's more striking than you're now kind of game management situation. And how fully functioning will he be when you go into this game? Bearing in mind how well the Browns defense played last weekend against them, and obviously this Broncos defense in their own way has had a really stellar season. And you know, this is a team that are going in the right direction. The Sean Payton, I think we're gradually starting to see the Sean Payton getting his grips on this Broncos team. 5-3, Bo Nix, for all the concerns going into the season, has had a fruitful few weeks as he's getting accolades around the NFL for his performances. In this game, though, I think the Ravens strike me as a team where when they have a difficult day out, we see them react very quickly and have a really stellar victory. We saw that when they lost to the Raiders in week 2, came out flying the following week. That's where I see this game. I think this is too big an ask. As good as the Broncos have been playing, I think this is too big of an ask. If they can hang around until the fourth quarter, maybe they can get something, sneak a victory. But I think this is the game where the Ravens will put the hammer down toward fourth quarter, pull away from the Broncos.
Shane, as we've been saying before, and as Brian has kind of alluded to there, the Ravens do have a tendency to drop some strange games during the season, but they rarely drop them back to back. And whatever about a divisional loss, as they suffered last week against the Browns, well and all as the Broncos have been playing, it's a tall order to go into Maryland and beat Baltimore.
Yeah, I think you make a good point about divisional games as well. I think the Ravens are a team that seems to be more open to dropping those divisional games against opponents who are more familiar with how they play than they are against in games like this against the Broncos. I have to say, I'm surprised that the Ravens are coming into this as 9-point favorites as I look at it here. I think the Broncos are playing well enough to at least show themselves to be a bit closer to that, particularly in the way that their offense is attacking. And when you look at the defense that they're up against, the Ravens defense is a great blitzing defense. It's not a great aerial pass defense. It's actually one of I think it's the last in terms of pass yards per game allowed in the league. Now, they're great at getting to the quarterback. And obviously, when you have a young quarterback in your sights, that's what you go for. You target them. You try to get as much pressure in. Denver actually have the second fewest sacks taken so far this year as well. That offensive line is, I think, stronger than most people think. All that said, though, I do think the Ravens are going to win this, mainly because, as you said there, I think they rarely go back-to-back and lose 2 games in which they probably shouldn't have lost. Is there a possibility that in the fourth quarter the Ravens might find some way to drop a dud again? Yes, that always seems to be the risk with this Ravens team. We say it week on week. But I just think that by the time we get to halftime, I think the Ravens have a nice enough cushion over the Broncos. As much as the Broncos, I think, are a good aerial offense, I just struggle to see how the Ravens' defensive game plan will let the Broncos score a lot of points earlier. And I think the Ravens are going to lock this game down soon enough.
Yeah, I think you're going against a big spread there if you're expecting Denver to go in here and spoil that homecoming party for the Ravens. It's Ravens all day for me. No.
Yeah, I'm the same. I think Brian said it earlier. You know, you mentioned it yourself. When the Ravens have it in them to give up a silly game every now and then, but rarely do they let that slip over into the following week. So I think they'll be too strong this weekend.
Kieran?
Yeah, despite the Broncos' kind of propensity for fast plays on D, I'll take Charm City at this one.
All right, we move on to the conquerors of the Ravens last week, the Cleveland Browns, who host the Chargers this week. And the Chargers are catching a point on the road, very marginal favourites there. I'll start off on this one. I think kind of the corollary to what we were saying about the Ravens is that the Browns have found a way to decode the Ravens. I think it helps, obviously, that they're playing them 2 games a season. That's one of those quirky divisional games. I think one of the things that you would have wanted to pick up heading into this Chargers game, though, if you were watching Cleveland last week, is while the Ravens didn't win, they certainly didn't find it particularly hard to move the ball against this vaunted Browns defense. It just about held up where it needed to, thanks in no small part, obviously, to a bad Kyle Hamilton drop and a would-be pick that could have been something of a game changer there. Chargers are a team that are quietly going well here, and we've kind of, not that we've slept on them, but because the AFC West is kind of over already with the Chiefs at 7-0, or so it would look at this stage of the season, you don't tend to look past that, but Chargers are tucked in there at 4-3, obviously just marginally behind the Broncos, who we've just spoken about, and they're not going too badly. Defense is holding up very well. Chargers are only giving up 13 points per game. This is a pretty stingy D, and they haven't necessarily played all the leading lights in the league just yet. And Justin Herbert is kind of finding his groove. He's spreading the ball around well, had a good game again last week, and he's got quite the target in Lad McConkey this year. Obviously, we talked about the draft this year, and Kieran gave us a great pen pick of a lot of those great receivers, and we've seen so many of them pan out. Malik Neighbors having a great year, Marvin Harrison Jr. having a great year. We talked about Brian Thomas with the Jags as another guy to watch, but Lad McConkey's really started to blossom over the past couple of games, and that provides a great target for Herbert, who obviously lost Keenan Allen and Mike Williams this offseason. Coping just fine without them, though, as far as it looks right now. I think they're going to cope just fine this weekend. I think you can score points on this Cleveland defense. I think the Ravens proved it last week, even though they didn't score quite enough. I think the Chargers put the handcuffs on Jameis. It's a great story. We talked about how entertaining Jameis is, how you want to see him out there and you want to be watching him. There's a reason we haven't seen a lot of him too, and there's a reason why he started on the bench, and there's a reason why he was the 3rd quarterback dressed as the emergency QB until he was called into action. I think you see a bit of a regression game from Jameis this week. I think the Chargers are just a defensive team to do it, and I think they will emerge victorious on the road. No.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting game. A few weeks ago, you might not have thought much about this game, but I think it's at least got a bit more of a interest to it now. Obviously, we know there was a bit of a cloud hanging over Cleveland, and whatever happened has happened, and they've made that change, and it just seems to have sparked a little bit of life there. Now, I think what adds to that as well is obviously, David Njoku comes back from injury and he's starting to get better. Nick Chubb has come back from injury. He gives another option. So that makes things a lot better for the Browns, along with an offensive line that is starting to get guys back in again. They had a lot of injuries. They were really looking bad for a while. So all of that kind of coming together does give them that little bit of a chance, and Jameis Winston a chance to come in and just maybe have a better go at it than Deshaun Watson has had. But I'm with you. I think this Chargers team is just quietly going about their business, as you say. They have an excellent defense, which is really stepping up. I'm not sure if Bosa is back this weekend or not. I think he may be, but that's obviously another big step for them. But the X factor is Justin Herbert, and you watch him over the last 2 weeks, and he really seems like he's beginning to pick it up. You mentioned Lad McConkey there is looking a very good player, and I just think they've more balance on a more settled defense and a star quarterback who really does feel like he's starting to get into the groove now this season. And I think those two together will make it a win for Los Angeles. But I do think it'll be a better game than we probably thought it could have been 2-3 weeks ago. So still could be fun to watch, but Chargers for me will get the win.
Shane?
Yeah, heart says Jameis, head says LA Chargers. Give me the bolts.
Kieran, can you see Jameis pulling this one out?
No, I think the Jameis train stops this week. Chargers games average a combined 31.9 points per game. I think the Chargers are going to get 22 of those. So I like Los Angeles.
What a difference. We were all on the Jameis train on Monday and singing his praises, but you look at the cold, hard reality of the Thursday heading into the weekend's games, and it looks very different. Brian?
I'll stay on the Jameis train for another week. I think we saw enough of Elijah Moore, Jerry Jeudy, and Joko last week. I think they're going to mix the ball up. I think the Chargers will struggle in the game, tight game, Browns again, to ride the momentum for another week.
Good stuff. Anything to keep us from being boring anyway. It's nice that someone goes against the grain. We got Dolphins-Bills up next, an AFC East clash with the Bills, catching 6 points there at home after the demolition job on Seattle last week. Shane, can they continue to keep rolling against the Dolphins with Tua back in harness?
They will keep rolling and they will steamroll for a couple of different reasons. Firstly, the Bills for the last couple of years have had the Dolphins number. Every time that we expect the Dolphins, and even I in the preseason was confident enough that the Dolphins might find a way to kind of unchain themselves from this rivalry this season. But the fact is the Bills just know how to beat the Dolphins. The Dolphins last year put 70 points on Denver. The following week went up to Buffalo and Tua threw 2 interceptions and let Josh Allen throw 4 touchdowns in what was a big win for Buffalo. This time in Buffalo, I'm expecting something similar. Quite simply, if you just look at the turnover battle, I can see where the Bills are gonna get turnovers. I think Devon Achane had a much better running game last year. I think he's can be susceptible for dropping the ball. If we look at Tua in the last 3 games played against the Bills, he's thrown an interception, 2 interceptions, and 3 interceptions earlier this year when they played on Thursday Night Football before Tua got unfortunately taken out of that game. And you look at what Josh Allen is doing. He threw his first interception of the year last week against Seattle. Him and his wide receivers seem to be getting much better in terms of their chemistry and the amount of yards that they build up. And that offensive line is playing exceptionally well, not only in pass protection, but particularly in the run game. The Bills are a much better team from top to finish. The only weakness here is if the Bills, who can be inconsistent on offense and have been in the earlier part of the season, somehow drop a dud or somehow don't game plan properly, and the Dolphins manage to blitz their way in to cause problems, then the Dolphins might be in with a chance at the further we get into the game. But I'll be honest, I just don't see that happening. I think the Bills are going to win by more than 6 points here.
Kieran, 2-5 is actually good enough for second place in the risible AFC East behind the Bills. But we're heading into that point of the season where you're not winning this game. Trade deadline is approaching, and there could be big changes in Miami.
Yeah, and I kind of thought that the Dolphins might have brought Tua back a little early last week. I mean, he made some completions and he looked capable, but was it too early? I have very, very high concerns about this Miami team. I mean, the Bills are 12-2 against Miami with Josh Allen playing. It's everything stacked up against them. With Tua, they're converting 60% of third downs. Without him, they're only converting 22. So we see what kind of team they are without him. But I don't think it's the Tua that we've seen, obviously, the last couple of years. Hill is not the same. Waddle's not the same. The run game, I mean, the Bills held Seattle to 32 yards on the ground last week. I mean, I can't see Shane or Mostert doing much work against them. It's in Buffalo. Weather's starting to get a little bit colder up in Western New York. And I just think, thinking about this Dolphins team, I keep going back to that image and that impression that they're a soft team. They weren't able to be tough and physical enough without Tua for those number of weeks. They have him back now, but I still don't see that there's enough kind of grit in that team. They're on the road in a colder environment. They're out of the sun. They've got to really put the work in. Who's ready for that work? And Allen and the way the Bills have been playing the last couple of weeks, who's going to bet against them? I mean, they've totally caught the groove. And we did have some concerns about what that offense would look like without Diggs, but they haven't really missed a beat. They've added Amari Cooper, but players like Keon Coleman has stepped right in and being a great addition. And even that Bills D, I think they're a top 5 D in the league right now. They're just swarming everywhere, picking off quarterbacks and making a lot of tackles. They rush the quarterback too. They put a lot of pressure on the quarterback, and I mean, it's prime for Tua to get rushed and just to get beaten around the place. We're going to see a lot about Tua's kind of resilience. Is he going to be able to kind of withstand a lot of those hits that are going to come his way from Epinesa and Rasul Douglas and players like that, and Russo out on the edge. So I have a lot of concerns for Miami. I think this is going to be, I don't want to say fairly easy Bills and a kind of routine win, but you're in the Bills' backyard. It's getting colder. It's probably going to be the low 50s in Buffalo. I just don't see any kind of shot for the Dolphins. I think they are going to be 2-6 by the end of this game.
Nolas, the lads have been saying the Bills have had the Dolphins' number, and it would require a fairly significant shift in the narrative of the season so far to see Miami coming in here and causing an upset. Is it on the cards for you?
No, not for me. Everything Kieran said there is spot on. I think this Bills team is just way, way too strong for the Dolphins, who are just having a really tough season. And yeah, I think the Bills take that one.
Brian?
I could see a scenario where if the Dolphins get their run game going with the consistency of the 3 running backs in which they have, we saw what the Ravens did on this Bills defense, despite the stats that kind of allude to the Bills defense being quite high up there. If they consistently keep that offense off the field, they might have a chance. But too big an ask for me, the Bills win.
Yeah, same here. It's Buffalo for me too. That brings us to the end of our first segment. We'll take a quick break. And that quick break brought to you by our partners Buskers on the Ball and Dublin's Temple Bar. We're 3 weeks away from Thanksgiving. I know it's only Halloween now, but it'll be rolling around very quickly. A feast of football, obviously, on top of the feast of everything else as well. Irish NFL show will be there. We'll be enjoying those games, Bears, Lions and Giants, Cowboys, both of which we'll be previewing presently. We'll be in Buskers on the Ball on the night. So please come join us. It's free entry, obviously, €6 pints from 6 p.m. and special offers on dinner and food. So get the turkey in, get the beers in, and get the games in with us. We start our next segment of picks, which is brought to you again by our partner QuinnBet, with the Commanders at Giants, a divisional game, Kieran, in which, while the Commanders are catching 4 points here and are favoured on the road, Giants tend to have found a way to beat these guys. And that's not the way the bookies are seeing it because of the way the Commanders have been playing. They come in obviously fresh off to Hail Maryland, and let's never mention it ever again, please, if we can avoid it. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, like you said, Jones has had their number, but I think that stops on Sunday. He's 5-2-1 against Washington, his best record against any team. But Giants are at home, and Giants at home and we saw against Pittsburgh on the road. They're more competent, more fluid, despite the fact that they had 11 penalties on Monday night and 2 turnovers. But they also went 5 of 15 on third downs, which was infuriating. But they're a better team on the road, which makes me nervous. They're not able to score points at home. Jones is completely ineffective at home. Neighbors has not been able to get the ball from Jones. So the offense kind of shudders to a halt at home. I mean, they haven't scored more than 18 points in the last 3 games. So everything points towards struggles for the Giants. Defense is where we can hang our hat. But, saying that, there are some not only injuries, but now there's trade talk going on with the trade deadline on Tuesday. Maybe they're going to start thinking about moving some players if things start going south. Sunday's results going to be big for the Giants. If they go to 2-7, I mean, there's a lot of players on that Giants team who could be making a boatload more money on different teams, and that the players are going to start thinking that. The teams are going to start thinking that. Just to bring up the Chicago game last week, we saw the grit and the determination of Jaden Daniels, and that impresses me immensely. And going into to East Rutherford against this Giants team who are struggling, you'd have to pick the Commanders. They're rolling. They're in the ascent right now in this division and in the league. All their players are clicking. Eckler, even Zach Ertz is contributing on offense. Meanwhile, the Giants, Singletary, I think is going to be declared fit. Tracy, there's doubts about him. He's kind of taken on the RB1 role, which I don't think the Giants saw as an option at the start of the season, but it's kind of means by necessity. It's just it's tough. It's a tough watch with the Giants. I'm just glad the game is not on prime time. But the way things are trending, the Giants are going in a different direction. Washington are on the up. So I like the Commanders in this. I think it's going to be closer than a lot of people think. I think the Giants are going to play in tough, low-scoring game again. The Giants just drag people down to their level at home. I mean, we saw the Bengals game when the Bengals only got 17 points. And even the Cowboys game, they didn't put up many points either. But I like a low-scoring game. I think the Commanders will pull out by field goal.
Yeah, I got to say, when I was looking across the slate of games this week and trying to muse on where might there be an upset, obviously one of the things you tend to alight on is all divisional games, and particularly a divisional matchup where one team seems to have the advantage over the other team over a series of games, as you rightly said, Kieran, where Jones actually does kind of seem to know how to play against the Commanders. Well, I struggle to make the case, though, as I looked at the Giants on Monday. Got a good look at both of these teams in some detail last week. And from a Bears perspective, clearly you're licking your wounds after the Commanders with that last second win. But I mean, you can't characterize what happened in Landover by that play. The Commanders should have had that game long won before then. A high-scoring offense, you could say, looked like maybe it was grounded against the Bears. I think that's a slightly false way of looking at it, though. Red zone issues aside, and red zone D from the Bears, which is the best in the league, to be fair, so far in the season, notwithstanding, Commanders pretty much moved the ball at will against one of the better units in the NFL. Giants have struggled in the passing game, albeit that that they found ways to make plays, and they do have that bend but don't break mentality. They're probably one of the finest exponents of it in the league at the moment, and they've had a good record at holding teams below an achievable threshold from a points perspective. But man, the amount of laundry in that Pittsburgh game, the penalties, the poor execution. Brian, I know we were back and forth and Kieran on the WhatsApp about Devin Singletary. He just didn't seem to know what his assignments were. Didn't seem to be able to chip where he needed to. He's running routes and guys are getting a clean run on Daniel Jones because he's not helping out. Like, did nobody show you the tape of TJ Watt before the game? I mean, just ridiculous stuff. And less said about that 2-point play, which unfortunately has become a microcosm of just how poorly the Giants have executed on offense this season, the better. Just very, very hard to see them springing a shock here. If it's going to happen, it's going to be because you see some big plays, you see some turnovers. Dexter Lawrence, lest we forget, is the sack leader in the NFL this year. They've been able to do things, and they've pulled rabbits out of hats for this team. It's just that they've been so let down by what's been happening over the other side of the ball. And unfortunately, I do see that being repeated from a Giants perspective this weekend. I think the Commanders come in and take care of business on the road. Brian?
I will side with the Giants. I think the enormity of last Sunday's win and the week in question that we've had in terms of the good side of it with the Commanders and obviously the bad side of it from a Chicago perspective. I think we played them in week 2. We should have beat them in week 2. I know it's a very different situation. Both teams are trending different direction. But the Giants didn't allow a touchdown with that Washington offense in that game. And I still think the Giants defense can find a way. Similar to what Kieran said, the Giants defense will keep the Giants in the game. And I actually think they'll find a way to pull it out on Sunday, because if they lose this, it really is over. But bearing in mind what's ahead with the Panthers, there is a scenario where they could win 2 games and all of a sudden it's a bit more respectful for the season. So I'm going to lean Giants to find a way to turn them over.
Shane?
I can understand the point that after such an emotional victory, which was in the case in the Commanders last week, that you go in the next week and actually you miss a beat, you lose the sharpness. But I just look at this game and I quite simply think that the Commanders know that they are in the race for the top of the division. And what they need to do now is to try and take control of games as quick as they can. Take command, if you will. So I think against this Giants, as good as the Giants defense is, I'm too impressed with Jaden Daniels to back against them. So I'm backing the commies in this one.
All right, we move into our rapid fire round now. We're into the 2-minute drill as we clean up some of these, shall we say, marginally less interesting games given the point of the season that we're at and the records of these teams. As we always say, one of these is bound to be an absolute cracker. So pick whichever one you want is going to turn out to have made fools of us, and one that would probably have been worthy of a more lengthy preview. But for now, we're just going to go around the houses and make our picks. Saints at Panthers. Brian?
Saints all day long. Derek Carr's back.
Yeah, Saints for me.
No.
Yeah, Saints.
Kieran?
Panthers are wojus. Give me the Saints.
I thought you were going to pick them there for a second. That was kind of marginally exciting. Now, Saints for me as well, who are 7-point favorites there if you're looking for the line. Patriots at Titans. Shane, any thoughts before we nail you for your pick?
Yeah, just briefly, the big hope for the Patriots is the fact that they're playing against a team who played against Detroit last week. And teams who play against Detroit are 0-6 the following week. That just shows how physical of football that Detroit plays. But I just look at this game. Firstly, the fact that Drake may or may not be playing is probably blunts New England's ability to score points against a pretty decent Tennessee defense. The fact that the Titans are home are probably be better planned out. And I just think that the Patriots were physical enough last week. They're going to have a drop off again this week. So for me, the Titans are 3-point favorites, and Titans by field goal sounds about right.
All right, I was actually going to lean Patriots in this one. It does depend on whether or not Drake May plays, but no, I think I'm going to go Titans. Brian?
Titans all day.
Kieran?
I owe the Pats after last week. I owe them one. So Tennessee are terrible. So I'm going to go New England.
No.
Yeah, Titans for me.
Right, and Raiders Bengals is the finest, or the final game, I should say, in our 2-minute drill. I'm going Bengals in this one. Bengals are 7-point favorites. Titans 3-point favorites in that last one. Just in case I forgot to mention it. Kieran?
Yeah, give me the Bengals. Raiders are awful too.
No, Cincy or Vegas for you?
No, Bengals for me. What Kieran said, this Raiders team is bad. I think even though the Bengals are struggling themselves, I think they'll have enough for this.
Brian?
I wouldn't have had this in the quick fire round. I think this is another game that could come down to the very end. I do think the Bengals will find a way, though.
All right, we'll have a post-show back and forth and post-mortem on why that one ended up in the quick fire round, Shane.
Maybe it's the Halloween vibes building, but I just have a funny feeling the Raiders might win this one. And also, this is the first week I'm backing against the Bengals, so write it down. Maybe I'll actually be wrong this time, and I might give the Cincy a bit of luck.
We move into the 9 o'clock window where the Bears travel to Arizona to take on the Cardinals. Tight spread on this one. Cardinals favoured by 1, Brian, after their 2-week winning streak with Chad Ryland on a run of walk-off field goals.
I'm annoyed with myself, Connor, because every year I put out these outlandish statements around teams I believe will make the playoffs, and I went with the Titans this year. But I did say numerous times I felt this Cardinals team were not far off being a team that could shock a lot of people this year and be in the running for the playoffs. And I think that's where they're at. And we've seen over the course of the last 2 weeks the Monday night game against the Chargers and how they came back from a double-digit deficit last week in Miami to pull out that game. Bearing in mind how well Tua seemed to have come on from his opening game, come back, and all the scrutiny that went with that. It was like the Cardinals were just there as the team that were just unfortunately going to take that hit, but they didn't. They rallied back, and for me, they're a team now that's playing under a head coach in Gannon, and I think they all understand the nature of what he's trying to deliver. And I think there's better days ahead. They're in a division right now where it's very competitive, and when I think of the other head coach, by golly, has he been thrown under the bus this week by the Chicago media? He had literally every little clip I watch is obviously backtracking on the records, road games, teams against 500 plus records, and it's not very fruitful. And it kind of goes back to the concerns you both had yourself and Noel around whether Eberflus should remain as head coach. I think last week's game is as much as you said on Monday, Connor, and the next NFL game comes around very quickly. I think this game is going to sting for quite a while with the Bears, and I think you rightly called out last week. Last week's game was a must-win, virtually because of the enormity what was ahead for the Bears in terms of the schedule. I think the Cardinals right now are going in the right direction. I think the Bears are too, but I think it'll be a Cardinals victory come Sunday evening.
All right, Noel, is it a bounce back for the Bears, or will the Cardinals make that winning streak 3?
You know, I've been thinking about this game all week and I couldn't come to a decision who I think will win. And I said, right, just when I'm talking about it, I'll see who comes out, because I think this is going to be a really good game. I mean, I talked about this Cardinals offense myself a few times during the season, and this Cardinals offense really does have the ability there to shock teams. Obviously, a lot of it falls on Kyler Murray, who can be, you know, hit and miss. If he's having a good game, that this offense really can be good. Obviously, they're in a division where, as Brian said, it's competitive. They will see a pathway to the playoffs here, and that's something that they will drive forward. And if you look at the games they've won, obviously they come back and they beat San Francisco. And there's a couple of games though they win by 1 and 2 points. I think it's 3 games they've won within 2 points. So you know they're a team that know how to grind it out so far this season. But looking at the Bears, I mean, I'm not worried about the Bears defense. As always, again, they keep a team under 21 points. I know you have the whole Hail Mary craziness at the end, but still that defense comes up and plays. And I think they'll be able to stand up strong against this Cardinals offense. It's the Bears offense I'm really wondering about. I don't think they should be overly worried by a Cardinals defense. But when you look at the slow starts they've been having all season, it's slow starts. Caleb Williams, you know, and the guys take a bit of time getting into it. That's something they need to address and they need to stop. But I think if they can start well, if they can use last week as a springboard to say, right, you know, a lot of players have come out and talked about decisions that the coaches made, or, you know, certain players maybe aren't putting it in training. If they can use that to really get the fires lighting and start quickly, I think this Bears offense can be a lot better. The big worry is the offensive line. We need to see who's healthy. There's a lot of guys questionable, went out with injuries last week. But I think overall, I think Caleb Williams, as bad at games he had for 3 quarters, showed us in the 4th quarter who he is as a quarterback and what he can really do. And you know, he really led this team down to what should have been a win that they didn't deserve. But you know, that's the way it goes sometimes. So I think this Bears team will be on fire this weekend. I think they'll have had enough of everything that went into last week. I think they'll be back to kind of right the wrongs. So I think the Bears will go in and win what I think could be an exciting game. And I think the Bears might actually concede more than 21 points for the first time in, I think it's 13 games. But I think they'll have enough on offense just to pip this Cardinals team away.
Yeah, I agree with you, Noel. I think the Bears will have to just come out and play lights out this week. I think there's so much pressure on them to do so from the media. You know, the players have come out and been quite outspoken, you know, to the point where they were kind of nearly rolling back towards the end of the week and say, oh, okay, we got to keep it in-house from here on in. DJ Moore had some words to say. Mercedes Lewis had some things to say. Tyreek Stevenson obviously had to come out and kind of give a mea culpa for his big failing in the final play in that Hail Maryland last week was a Fail Mary from the Bears' point of view. I think This is a must-win game for the Bears. I talked about how last week was a very important game because it was a prove-it game for the Bears. Like, are you actually any good? Are you potentially a playoff team here? But they got to win this week. Otherwise, even beating the Patriots next week, I don't think leaves them in a good enough position with the gauntlet they got ahead of them for them to make any meaningful progress as a team based on where they were last year. And I think the coaching staff will be playing for their jobs very quickly if they don't put this one in the bank. Shane.
That was an excellent Freudian slip, by the way. That was fantastic. Seeing the fail Mary slip out. Look, I just look at Kyler Murray. I looked how much space his wide receivers got last week, and the fact that there was no QB hits laid on him last week against the Dolphins. Is that a bad performance by the Dolphins defense, or is the Cardinals team genuinely good? I think a bit of both, and I think all in all, the Cardinals might sneak a close one here.
Kieran?
Don't rate Cardinals. I don't rate Kyler Murray. I don't think he's a leader. I've said that plenty of times before. I think this is going to be a big bounce back game for the Bears in the desert. I like the Bears.
All right, we move into our final segment of Week 9 picks and previews. We are heading into what may well be the best game of the weekend from a certain perspective. I know a lot of people here are very excited to see it, and a lot of people in the comments as well looking forward to this one. It's Lions at Packers, a pivotal NFC North clash that ultimately might decide who comes out on top in that division. Massive from a tiebreaker point of view. It's at Lambeau. The Lions, though, are favoured on the road, Shane.
Yeah, I think the Lions are favoured for probably a couple of different reasons. Firstly, their form is excellent. The amount of points that they've put up in the last couple of games, they put up 52 last week, despite the fact that Jared Goff didn't even have to pass for more than 86 yards. That's just how good. It was a bit of a freak game, in fairness, just the way that things kind of worked out against Tennessee last week. One big area of battle here between the Packers and the Lions will be the turnover battle. And in that, the Lions have a huge advantage. They were able to get turnovers off the run plays. They're able to get turnovers off interceptions. And you look at Jordan Love, who I'm fairly sure will be playing, even though I think they're sacrificing his practices throughout the week in order for him to be on field against Detroit at the weekend, which I think is something I missed on Monday, I'll be honest. And and going back to Brian's point on Monday, that's probably the way that the Packers want it, because they really need to put up a good performance against the Lions here. But just look at Jordan Love's ability to throw interceptions. He threw, 3 against the Vikings already this season, 2 weeks ago against the Packers, 1 against the Cardinals, 1 against the Rams. I don't think it was on the field long enough to throw one against the Jaguars last week. He throws picks, and he throws picks, I think, against defenses that have good cornerbacks and defenses that can read things. And I just think there are going to be just enough key moments, and we talk about situational football a lot, particularly when it comes to Detroit and the way that they approach situational football. It's very different from the way any other team does, which is one of their really great strengths, and it's one of the reasons why they've developed as a squad so far, is their aggressive approach to situational football. They will be aggressive when it comes to how to deal with Jordan Love and how to deal with those wide receivers. And as good as I think that LaFleur might have a good defensive game plan for whatever Jared Goff might bring out, I just back the Lions to get more turnovers. And when they get turnovers, I back them to convert. They were 5 of 5 in the red zone last week. Again, that was against Tennessee, but that's just efficiency from a team which has become a well-oiled machine. Detroit, I think, are just getting a little bit better every week. This is probably one of, if not their toughest challenge so far this season, facing against a big divisional opponent. But turnovers are going to be key here. I can't see a game where Green Bay has enough control and security over the ball in order to put up enough points to build up a nice little cushion against a Detroit team that will have a couple of things up its sleeve for a start, and secondly, will be aggressive from the start.
No, Bears and Vikings fans who both have their own beef with Green Bay might not like to hear this, but this is now the defining rivalry in the NFC North.
Yes, and I think when you go back to the start of the season, I think these are the two teams people would have predicted being 1 and 2 fighting for the division. The only thing is, I don't think they're going to be fighting for the division. I think the Lions, I would take the Lions. This isn't even a vote against Green Bay. This is a vote for Detroit. I just think this offense is awesome at the moment, and there isn't a team in the NFL I would pick at this moment to win a game against the Lions. I mean, if you look at the last 4 games, they've scored 42, 47, 31, 52. And they're against some teams that have good defenses. You know, there's a couple of good defenses in there that you wouldn't expect to give up them kind of numbers. But the Lions up front just seem to be able to, week on week, just steamroll teams. When you look at the players on offense, they're just awesome. If you go to defense, I think this is a big question this weekend against the Packers. With Aiden Hutchinson missing, I think they'll be going up against a good offensive line, and I think that's going to tell on what kind of pressure he can get on Jordan Love, who, like Shane, I assume, is going to play. So that'll be a big kind of question mark. But then we've talked about the Lions defense and Brian Branch stepping up, and you know, when you talk about Jordan Love throwing interceptions, I think the Lions have sorted the secondary out this season enough that they'll be able to capitalize on any, you know, bad throws that he makes, that he has shown a tendency to throw over the season. So overall, I think I like this Packers offense. I think there's some really good, young, exciting players in there who can step up when needed. I think they've scraped a couple of games over the last few weeks with kind of last minute field goals to win the games. I think that's going to end this weekend. I think to come up against the Lions team that, as I say, on offense is just rolling over teams, and I don't see that changing this weekend. I think the Lions will take this big divisional win and just keep going from there.
There's only two question marks over the lines for me. Firstly is, how are they going to really compensate for the loss of Aiden Hutchinson when the meaningful games start post-Thanksgiving and heading into the playoffs? The second one is, have they maybe peaked too early? But I still think they're going to win in Green Bay this weekend. Brian?
I'll start again, because I think the Packers need this. Sometimes desperate teams find ways to win games. And if they lose this game to two games behind the Lions, and assuming that the Vikings take care of business against the Colts on Sunday Night Football, there'll also be a game back on the Vikings. I think this is crucial time now for the Packers. I think they find a way to. Who put up their own points in their own way at home. I think the Packers find a way to get over the line.
Kieran?
Goff has thrown 12 touchdowns and 1 pick in the last 5 games. I just like this Lions team overall, and I think they're going to have too much for the Packers. So give me Detroit.
All right, next game up is another divisional game. It's Rams Seahawks in the West, where things are pretty nicely poised there. It's probably the most competitive division in the NFL right now. Seahawks at home. Rams favored by 1 on the road, though, after that mauling that the Seahawks took from the Bills last week. And this is not the team that you want to be welcoming into your building right now. Rams have just won 2 games. Obviously, they have Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua back and playing pretty damn well. Thank you very much. They've managed to hold the fort pretty well. Rams at 3-4. Everybody only looking up at teams that are 4-4 ahead of them. We've talked about how the Cardinals have a tough game on their hands against the Bears. Rams could go worst to first if the results go their way. Obviously, they'll have to take care of business in Seattle to do that. I really like the way that, you know, and we talked about Sean McVay before, and we've talked about this team and how, you know, they've managed with meager resources in the past, and they've managed with a lot of injuries in the past to just keep things ticking over and keep themselves in the fight, nick a game here and there, and lo and behold, they're back in it when they need to be, and they're back in it when things start heating up a little bit. I think they're probably, you know, aside from the Lions and the Chiefs, probably the team you would least want to face right now, because they got a bit of momentum. You kind of look at them and you go, oh yeah, I forgot them. They had all those guys. Now they're all back. This is dangerous. I think this puts Seattle in a little bit of trouble. They lose this one, they're going to lose ground in a very tight division. Rams have all the incentive in the world to go in there and take this one, and I think they will do just that. Brian?
It's amazing what a week in the NFL can do, because we're not 10 days removed from all the speculation of Cooper Kupp essentially being traded to, you know, it's been suggested of the Chiefs and other teams, and now all of a sudden it's like, oh, you know, hold my beer. This team are well within their rights to be challenging for a wild card. As you said, came off the victory against the Raiders, where they were quite sloppy. But last week was the marquee victory of the season for them, and I couldn't make it takes your attention when you see them beat a team such as the Vikings, who've had such a successful season. For me, the X factor is Williams, the running back. He's had such a fantastic season, and we can talk about our cups, and we can talk about Cooper and, you know, Nacua coming back. But ultimately, if he's playing well, it's such a balanced offense. It gives Matthew Stafford such an avenue and a threat, not just in the rushing game, but in the passing game. He had a passing touchdown last week. Seattle have lost at home to the Bills. They've lost at home to the Giants. The Broncos nearly beat them in week 1. I think that 12-man conversation is starting to dwindle. I don't think it's as daunting as it used to be for teams to go into Seattle and win. And I think the Rams will go in there, and I'm with you, Connor. I think they'll find a way to get a victory.
Shane?
Who knew that Pete Carroll was the real 12th man? Now that he's gone, the Seahawks start losing at home all of a sudden. And just like on that point as well, I don't think the Seahawks defense is as good in a lot of key situations as people think they are. And considering the talent the Rams are coming back and just how good Sean McVay is at planning, particularly when it comes against divisional opponents, I think the Rams are going to come in and get a victory here.
No.
Yeah, I agree with Shane there. I think when you have those guys coming back at wide receiver and Sean McVay there with Stafford, I think the Rams are going to start maybe getting moving a bit more now. And yeah, I think they'll win this weekend.
Looking like a full house, Kieran, unless you say something different. Rams or Seahawks?
Well, I do like the Rams, and I like the way they're trending with getting their players back healthy. But I'm going to go with the Seahawks at home. I think Geno's going to have DK back this week. They're still smarting from that beat around by Buffalo last week, so I like Seattle.
Right, the resurgent Eagles hosting the Jaguars and favoured by 8 points at home. Shane, how do you see this one going?
This is, of course, the return of Doug Peterson to Philadelphia. And will this be the last game that he will coach at the Jacksonville Jaguars? I think there's a pretty decent chance of that happening, just because the Eagles are coming into this nicely informed. The only real chance for there's two real things that can go well for the Jags. Either Trevor Lawrence manages to find something in himself to pass for 4 touchdowns and really build up a score, which in fairness, I think he and that offense has slowly been improving. They came away from London, I think, in better form, as they generally do. They went in against New England. They were fairly strong. They got pretty close against the Packers last week, against a really strong favorite Packers team last week. And they're going in against Philadelphia. This is also, by the way, the first game that Nick Sirianni is coaching in Philadelphia since that spat he had up with the crowd 2 weeks ago. Although I imagine after getting 2 big victories, especially one against the Giants, I can't imagine the fans would be on his back too much. I think this would just be very simple, though. Unless the Eagles, for some reason, aren't game planning for this because they're thinking too much about the Cowboys and the Commanders 2 weeks ahead, they're just going to run riot here. I don't think the run defense in particular in Jacksonville is strong enough to stop Saquon Barkley. Once Saquon Barkley gets things going, I think from early on in the game, that gives Philadelphia options. I mentioned here Monday how Jalen Hurts is starting to change his game. He's seeing the middle of the field more. He's seeing further down the field more. He's not checking it down. They're not relying on the tush push quite as much. They're still using it. It's still a part of their game plan. But I think that offense is starting to be a bit more diverse in the way that it is approaching games. And against a Jacksonville defense, which hasn't really put up one good performance so far this season, I just think the Eagles are just going to be too good enough. And the further we get into this game, the bigger the gap is going to be. And I have a funny feeling that Doug Peterson might as well just stay in Philadelphia after this one. I can't imagine he'll be kept on as head coach afterwards.
Yeah, he was joking at the weekend because they were talking about the Philly special statue outside the stadium, about whether he'd visit the statue. And he said, "What do you want me to go and visit the tailgate too and say hi to the fans?" I think, as you say, Shane, that might be exactly what he's doing, depending on the way this one goes, and certainly depending on the way I think it's likely to go. If you're looking for reasons to be cheerful from a Jacksonville point of view, Trevor Lawrence has been playing well over the last couple of games. 72% completion. He's thrown for over 1,000 yards in his last 3 games. There are some decent things happen. There are some sparks there. We saw it last weekend against the Packers, even though it was in a losing effort. He's finding his receivers. Evan Engram's shown up really well for him. They have been able to run the ball a little bit better too. But just defensively, like, that pass defense is an absolute mess, and they meet the Eagles at the wrong time. Vic Fangio's defensive structure has taken a little while to bed down there, but they've seemed to have addressed actually the issues in the secondary that we pointed out early and often last season reasonably well. I think they've made some good additions through the draft. Cooper DeJean has shown well, had a good game last weekend. They've got Hassan Reddick in harness, of course. That's a good addition to be able to make at this time of the season. Hurts has looked like a different animal, Shane, as you said. His passing charts are looking different. It's massive help when he's got AJ Brown in particular back. Saquon is obviously key to everything. Brian, you talked about how Kyren Williams is massively important for the Rams, no more than Christian McCaffrey is massively important for the 49ers. Saquon is the fulcrum around which Saquon and AJ Brown are the fulcrums around which this Eagles defense rolls. They're just not the same team without them. When they have them, however, they're very, very dangerous. I think what they did in Cincinnati last weekend probably has got an awful lot of people off their back. There's been a pile on Philadelphia. There's been a pile on Sirianni. That's a statement victory against the Bengals team that had to have it, that had been on the bubble themselves, that didn't play badly, but just got handled, particularly down the stretch. And when the Eagles needed to stomp on the throat, they did it. And this is the perfect opponent for them to be playing right now to add to that momentum that they've already picked up. And there's a reason they're 8-point favorites, and I think they're fully justified at that. Kieran. Yeah,
I'm a little scared for the Jags going into Philadelphia. They gave up 28 points on average and 400 yards a game. And they've lost Christian Kirk for the season. Gabe Davis is knocked up. Thomas is questionable. The offense is not really the problem with Jags. Like you said, it's that paper thin secondary, and I think they're going to get picked apart by this Eagles offense. Home game, just I'm scared for the Jags. I think this is going to be ugly. Yeah, it's the Eagles for me.
Brian?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's an Eagles victory, but I don't think it's the end of Doug Peterson. I think he will find a way to see out the season, but inevitably he'll be gone at the end of the year. But I don't think he'll be gone because of the nature of this defeat, because they played quite well over the past 2 weeks and didn't get out the right side of last week's game.
Well, there's nothing like playing quite well to hang on to your job in the NFL. No.
Yeah, no, I think for me it's the Eagles as well. I think things seem to be balancing out there a little bit now. It kind of feels like it's settling down a bit, and I think they'll look at the division and think, if the Cowboys don't get a result, that a win here just opens a little bit of a gap between them and the Cowboys and puts pressure on the Commanders if they don't win. So I think they'll have enough this weekend. Yeah.
Sunday Night Football up next, and this game took on a very different complexion to what it could have. You might have looked at this one and said, surely there were better games to put in this window, considering the Lions are playing the Packers and there's a couple of other spicy divisional clashes going on across the league this weekend. But you got Joe Flacco back, O'Brien, and that makes it very different.
Yeah, I think this game, NBC, the others were fortunate that the likes of Fox and CBS that those games were right to protect them. They couldn't get moved to Sunday Night Football, because when this was moved, there was a bit of an eye-opener. But the nature of the week, which we've seen, we all did the piece last week in Buskers around this Texans Colts game last week, and we spoke about how we felt Joe Flacco gave the Colts the best opportunity to win and potentially make the playoffs. But we understood the nature of why they wouldn't go there, because they've got a young developing quarterback and they really have to understand what he is and what he's going to be. But what we've seen over the last week is, to me, they've essentially thrown him under the bus. They're saying it's not about him, tapping out of the game, but it has to be. I mean, there's so much scrutiny around that this week. That wouldn't have gone down well. It wouldn't have been well received in the organization that we have a quarterback who's supposed to be the team leader. But for me, it's not even about that. It's about the inconsistency of him as a quarterback. We saw last week some great players, then we see him yet again going in, hurting himself into crazy plays where he's running. Again, I think the head coach has a lot to blame there in terms of the play calling. But Joe Flacco will probably settle this team down and probably will bring them towards the playoffs and will win AFC South type games. But not in this instance. I think this is a nice get right game for the Vikings, having lost last week. Thursday Night Football, 10 days to rue a loss in LA. I think the Vikings come out quick and early and put this away. And I think this is a rocking chair game.
Right, Kieran, I kind of half fancied this one for an upset. I'm not going to give away my cards just yet, but do you think it's going to be a rocking chair game for the Vikings, or can the Colts show us something?
Well, I mean, like Brian said, I like the Colts a lot better with Flacco behind center. But the Richardson stuff, again, it gets me thinking about watching him in college, and he had some issues playing in Florida. But it also got me thinking about everything that's going on in the college game, which has a direct kind of correlation on the NFL. We've seen the transfer portal the last couple of years, and we all remember that Brady clip over the summer where players, it's not about learning a program, it's about learning a playbook now. So many quarterbacks that are coming into the league, up to 3 or 4 years ago, they were at one team and they would fight for their spot and they would move up the depth chart. Now they're hopping from team to team. It's making for great entertainment in college football, but by the time they get into the league, they don't have the same structure that they should have, or that they did have, that quarterbacks such as Flacco, such as the Mannings back in the day had. So you're getting a lot of inconsistency. And this, to me, when I saw the Richardson stuff, I was like, yeah, I saw that when he was playing in college. So it's we could talk about a maturity issue, we could talk about a fatigue issue, but the bottom line, he's been playing terrible and he's holding this offense back. They have a better chance. They're a better team overall with Flacco behind center, and he gives them a better chance to win. Now, saying that, I don't think they'll win because I think the Vikings are a better team. But the Colts are gonna, they're gonna make more of a game of it with Flacco. Even that loss against the Jaguars early in the season, we saw what he was able to do, just kind of dynamic plays and picking out Pierce and Josh Downs and those guys. But I think the Vikings have too much. I think when you look at you look on paper and you look at the team on team, the Vikings have just got too much. That defense, even though they lost Darisaw, that defense with Van Ginkel and with Harrison Smith, that's too much for the Colts to handle. And almost 80% of the Vikings touchdowns have been passing, which is the second highest in the league. And they're just gonna, Darnold's just gonna throw that ball all over the place to Jefferson, and even Aaron Jones is probably gonna set up as a receiver. But on paper, the Vikings have more talent Colts, they'll probably stick with it into the third quarter, but the Vikings have too much power and too much class to kind of not to win this game. They've already lost 2 on the bounce. They can't afford to lose 3. If they lose a third one, now all the alarm bells are going to go ringing. The Lions are going to start getting a little hope from that, and then the Bears might take some solace from that too. So it's a big game for the Vikings. They're going to be at home. You'll have Skull, you'll have the big horn going off, you'll have the Sunday Night Football audience. I think they're going to show up. I do like the Colts to make it competitive, but it's going to be the Vikings for me.
Yeah, we all love the big horn. Of course, Brian and Shane got to see it close up in London. I think it's going to be blowing aplenty this weekend. As you were saying, Kieran, I nearly cut and paste that. Does Joe Flacco give the Colts a better chance to win? Yeah. Could it be entertaining? Could he produce one of those magical games? Yeah. Do I think it's going to happen? Nope. I wouldn't read too much into the Vikings slide. They've lost to better teams than this. They're going to take care of business this weekend. It's Vikings for me. Shane?
I'm too tired to make my pick. Can I just tap my head twice like this? It means I'm too tired. I can pull out now. I don't want to make it. And I'm being a jackass. Look, I don't want to read too much into the fact that the Vikings lost the last 2 in a row. They lost to the Lions, and they lost on Thursday Night Football after playing the Lions. And they're going to come into this, and I think they're going to be just fine.
Brian? Oh, you already had your pick.
I already have it. I'd go again, Connor, if you wish. Yeah.
Sorry.
The Vikings will be blowing their horn on Sunday night. Comfortably. No. There you go.
Ryan just made my pick for me. Yeah, no, the Vikings are too strong. I do like the move they've made at quarterback for the Colts. As Brian mentioned, we talked about it, and I'm surprised they did it. But I do think from a football point of view, it does make the Colts a better team. I think Richardson was wildly overdrafted when he was taken number 4. I thought that was terrible, but sure. Yeah, no, Vikings too strong. Colts will be better for it, but not this weekend. The Vikings need to get out of this mini kind of rut they've been in, and I think they will. I think they're too strong to go 3 losses in a row.
All right, the one remaining game of the weekend is the Bucks Chiefs and Monday Night Football. We will have our Monday Night Football preview podcast available from midday on Monday, and we're back Monday evening at 9, as always, to recap all the main talking points from the Week 9 action that we've just previewed. We'll also have our instant reaction podcast available from 1 a.m. on Monday morning for the early risers. But that's it for now on the Irish NFL Show.